Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our first Wellness Masterclass of 2022. Before we begin, some quick Zoom logistics. Please stay on mute when you're not speaking to ensure there are no noise disruptions, and we recommend speaker view for today's session. Thanks so much. And now I'm excited to introduce Nancy Davis, the Chief Creative Officer and Executive Producer of the Global Wellness Summit, who will welcome today's special guest. Over to you, Nancy.
Thank you very much, Kendra. Well, welcome to the first masterclass of 2022. I could not be more excited than to kick off this year's events with the one and only Beth McGroarty, VP for Research and Forecasting at both the Global Wellness Summit and Global Wellness Institute. And it seems only fitting that we should begin the 2022 Wellness Masterclasses with a look at the trends we have forecasted. One trend we would all like to see in the world is peace. And so I just want to take a moment to send our collective and powerful, heartfelt prayers to the courageous men, women, and children of Ukraine, and to those incredible souls in neighboring countries taking in refugees and providing a safe haven. So our hearts are with you. With us today is my dear colleague and friend, Susie Ellis, Chair and CEO of both the Global Wellness Summit and Global Wellness Institute. And Susie also wrote one of the trends this year, and I'll be coming to her during this call for her legendary vision and wisdom. Now, I have introduced Beth McGroarty many times before, and this time I honestly found myself at a loss for words. I've described her as the trend's brain trust, an archaeologist when it comes to unearthing health and wellness trends. She's wise, witty, absolutely wonderful. And Beth is the one person global media call for her insights and intelligence. So I decided to call the global media and see what they thought about Beth. And here's what they had to say. Cecilia Jer, Director of Cultural Strategy, TBWA Worldwide, said, Beth is not only a wellness whiz and master mobilizer, but also the very best of us, kind, generous, clever, curious, and deeply human. Cecilia's colleague, Skylar Hubler, Senior Cultural Strategist at TBWA Worldwide, offered this. Beth is a top-notch researcher, master of foresight, an expert in all things wellness. She'll draw you in with her smarts, then keep you engaged with her passion. Elaine Glusak, who is on this call with us here today and is a freelance writer and frugal traveler columnist for the New York Times, said this, a genius in identifying trends well before they're evident, Beth McGroarty can articulate each tree, yet somehow recognize patterns in the forest that is wellness. And Rena Raphael, a global journalist, finishing a book called The Gospel of Wellness, said this. Beth is the sharpest and most insightful wellness industry analyst I've had the pleasure of working with. She consistently separates the truth from the hype. I really think Beth is the bomb. Beth has helped shape the wellness industry with her knowledge, her passion for truth and evidence, her high standards, her brilliant writing, and her willingness to go against the prevailing winds. And as she did this year, she doesn't mind getting dirty, all in the name of wellness, and more about that shortly. It is this very approach to her work that has made the global wellness trends that we produce the gold standard in the industry. Beth also writes The Trendium, which is a publication of the Global Wellness Summit, as well as The Brief, which comes from the Global Wellness Institute. Beth has influence over the research we do, the positions we take, the thinking we offer the world. And just last month, we launched Global Wellness News, which is a new publication from our resident Oracle and shares important news articles that impact health and wellness on a global scale. It's a quick read, but an important one. Beth is a treasure. We all love her. And it's a real treat to have her with us today to unpack the most recent Global Wellness Trends report. She lives in LA. She's a notorious night owl, so I have to give her props for getting up early to be with us today. The one, the only, and I hope the caffeinated Beth McGroarty.
Oh, that was like, this is your life. I'm done.
Beth, everybody loves your insights about trends, about wellness, what's happening in the world. Why don't we start with a wide view of the industry? What changes are you seeing? What's been happening over these past crazy years?
You know, it's so funny. I was just before this call, I was lying on the couch and lying there pondering how has wellness really changed in the last 2 years? Like, how would you describe the shifts that one kind of feels in one's gut? And then magically, Rena Raphael, who you just described, called on this topic for her piece that she just wrote called "The Wellness Vibe is Shifting, the Goop Era is on its Way Out." So we had this, I'm sure she took up her day, a 2-hour conversation about, you know, some big picture ways that wellness feels pretty different right now. Like, it's not that they're structurally done, but they're vibes. So some of the ones are that consumers feel less duped by magical and pseudoscientific solutions. There's fatigue with the sort of immunity and stress release gummies. They are demanding more evidence. I feel there's a need for more honesty and transparency as to the whys of wellness. And they don't expect clinical trial levels of proof. But I feel that there's a little bit of embarrassment that they were that wellness consumer of 2019 and they want to move on. I feel that they're tired of wellness as elitist hyper-consumerism. I mean, anti-consumption is going to define the next age in the world and the next era in wellness. And the future wellness market will champion and be a locus of a slower and more responsible way of life. I also think that self-only care or self-involved wellness feels super naive now. I mean, I think one thing we learned in the pandemic is our health is inextricably bound up with nature and the health of others, and restoring nature and a more inclusive wellness is going to matter like never before. There's a lot of fatigue with wellness as about perfect looks or a perfect lifestyle. Wellness has shifted completely from weight loss to mental health. And, you know, when Rena and I were talking, it's like the shifts indicate a new wellness consumer that's emerging. And the words are one that's more reflective, serious, sober, and less selfish. You know, I was talking to Rena about it. In the last year, I think I was a little confused and worried. I would read the news every morning. I used to see that there was a new wellness product or trend like every week, and now not so much. But I think this less hysterical market feels healthy. It's a sign of the wellness market maturing. I think wellness becomes more important post-pandemic, but less frothy. And I think there's a profound new respect for prevention, mental wellness, nature, and these are all huge themes in the 10 trends that we did. I would also say that the 2019 moment of when, you know, the Jen Guntners were bashing wellness from the medical side and conflating all the silly wellness with all wellness feels really outdated too. And I think the future is less warfare between healthcare and wellness. So I don't want to overstate that the elitist and evidence challenged wellness products and market are gone, but there's a strong sense that that decade before the 2019, before that goopy wellness market, as Rena calls it, is sort of more in the rearview mirror. And I really think it's such a good thing because fashions by nature die. So just to add to the shifts in the market that begin with S, a more serious, a more sober, a less selfish wellness, it all means a more sustainable wellness market, I think.
That's you know, actually very, I mean, it's wonderful news. You know, talk a little bit more about this maturity of the industry, because I think, you know, everybody has been exposed to so much coming at us. Wellness certainly was, I don't want to say a silver lining, but it certainly came to the fore during these COVID years we've all been living through. But this new sort of serious tone, when an industry matures like that, what's the, you know, sort of outlook, do you think?
I think it gets, well, first of all, it's been almost entirely consumerist market. So completely tied to fashion mechanisms, very product based, very sales based. I mean, I think what's happening, you know, obviously wellness's umbrella is just expanding crazily. But I mean, you know, even what you see in healthcare, you know, taking a much harder look at prevention, which we see in our coaching trend. I mean, I just feel that it's more than a consumer market now. And also, I don't think it is just fashion anymore. So if wellness took over fashion, fashion's kind of dead. I feel like it's actually in its own place now forever. I mean, the maturity has to do with, you know, thinking beyond a single consumer, a single young, white, beautiful woman consumer, more inclusivity. And I also think, you know, it's like evidence-based has to come into the question, you know, more evidence, gathering more evidence, being more honest with consumers. I think that's all signs of a kind of maturing market.
Do you think there's a different sort of definition of wellness, if you will, now post, I don't want to say post-pandemic, we're still sort of in the throes of it, but we're coming out of it a little, on the other side of it, things are opening up and moving on. Has the industry, you know, sort of redefined itself in a way? Is there a new definition you could point to?
I just think it's beyond products, consumption, sales, you know, and fashion. I think what a lot of things we learned in the pandemic are, you know, is to kind of back to basics wellness. So, yeah. You know, absolute, not just reverence in some kind of birdsong way, but, you know, a really intense new, you know, interrogation of our relationship to nature, things that are free. And so I think most people think of wellness as very, you know, holistic and capacious, and, you know, everything from financial wellness to mental wellness. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's just, it feels, I do think there's a fatigue with it only having been yoked to the sort of fashion mechanism and the next. And I think there's a really profound respect for the pillars that have always been there. So to me, this feels healthier. I think it's probably, you know, I said I was a little scared. Where are the trends? Oh my God, where have they gone? But they didn't run out of ideas. It's a shift in, you know, a kind of more sobriety.
So Beth, when you look at this year's trends report, the 2022 Global Wellness Trends Report, are there themes, like macro thoughts that appear that speak to you?
Yeah, and across there's very different trends that I reread the report, and it's, oh my God, it's so much concept, so many companies, it's a lot to have in your brain at one time. But I think one key theme is that wellness, if it used to be an escapist, kind of pleasure-based, it's, you know, practices are becoming more about preparing for a very volatile future. I think we've all grasped that our future is going to be very unpredictable politically, environmentally, health-wise. We just went through a pandemic. This week, we're watching the horror in Ukraine. This morning, I read a new UN report on climate change, which is outrageously bleak, the bleakest yet, and arguing that any further delay in action is death. So this is, you know, one of our trends is called next-gen naturalism, and this runs across a few trends. There is a kind of new survivalist or self-reliant concept of wellness. So wellness as a path to resilience, and that involves reclaiming some lost and ancient skills. I mean, we see this in the mania for gardening, foraging, wilderness skills. I mean, I read a stat, this is just so crazy. Over half of 18 to 34-year-olds in the UK would rather visit a garden center than go to a nightclub. You know, we see, you know, in the dirty wellness trend, people becoming interested in really hard agricultural knowledge, new ways of farming that can restore the world's soil. I feel like there's, across the trends, there's a questioning of where all this hyper-modernity and the relentless progress of the last decades and technology have gotten us in pretty bad places. So a number of trends are about restoring some lost human wisdom. For instance, the senior living trend is about new intentional living models that are intergenerational, which is the way people always lived. The technological wellness trend is about a new era where we really interrogate our time with technology and start to limit it.
All right, let's do these one at a time so we can really get into what these trends are about. And I remind everybody that when we send the follow-up email with the link to the recording, we'll also send the link for you to purchase the trends report, which is amazing. I think it's 110 pages, if I'm not mistaken, and it is packed with incredibly powerful information. Let's look at the trends, and let's start with the two, Beth, that you wrote, which are incredible pieces of scholarship. The first being Dirt-E Wellness, the health of the world's soil and the impact of soil exposure on human health. Think soil bathing. Talk to us about dirt. Give us the dirt, Beth.
Yeah, this is a complicated trend. It's in two parts. I mean, first of all, I think one of my takeaways was I didn't really think much about soil. Maybe most of us don't, but doing the research, it's astounding. It's our planet's most extraordinary microbiome. It's one handful has 50 billion life forms. I don't think I grasped the work that this microbial ecosystem does. It cycles all the nutrients to plants that feed our entire planet. It captures vast amounts of carbon. So the first part of the trend looks at how industrial agriculture has created a massive soil crisis. So this is a food, health, and environmental crisis. And a new era of what is called regenerative agriculture is really here, which restores soil's biodiversity and can fight climate change. So it's been the hottest topic in farming. It is, you can read thousands of articles, but really the wellness world has been a little slow. The fashion industry, as the New York Times showed last month, is all over sourcing from regenerative farms for materials and ingredients. But now I think the wellness world is going to pivot to regenerative farming. We see Devines and Gerlique and these people that are early pivoters and adopters. But there's all these ways in which the regenerative concept, the regenerative farming is going to change. So Regen certified is going to be the next food label, which will be more important than organic. There's a whole lot of reasons for that, but one of them is that organic doesn't reflect the nutritional value of produce, which has plummeted under both industrial and organic agriculture. I mean, there's just so many interesting things. We think of wellness real estate as communities that are like dripping with billion-dollar amenities, but when you look at the new farm agrihoods, the regenerative agrihoods that are so trending, I mean, that's another sign in wellness of how this is being impacted. The second part of the trend, which fascinated me, is, obviously humans used to live in the soil, now we're soil deprived. But when you look at the medical research and the microbiome research, it's so fascinating because it indicates that the soil and the human microbiomes are anciently intertwined. They share the same microbial DNA, the same key beneficial bacteria, and it must be why healthy soil has such a big impact on everything from our immune systems to our mental health. So the second part of the trend, and it has so many parts, is about all the ways that the wellness world is getting people back to some soil exposure and soil bathing. So this ranges from everything from the farm and getting deep in the farming, something Elaine Glusak covers in her travel trend, becoming as important as spa and fitness. And this isn't like a farm tour. This is like learning from agricultural specialists, farming, even whole menus of farm-based wellness. There's another fascinating aspect of the trend is designers and architects creating new environments that are infusing microbial rich soil particles into interior spaces for children and in schools, to boost immunity and to boost health. And, we go through everything: soil treatments, mud, clay, soil-based skincare, just so much. It just blows my mind. Who would have thought that soil is so rich a topic, and one that you can't even imagine having done as a trend just a couple of years ago in a way.
Beth, I have to ask you that when you write a trend like this and delve into something like this, you become kind of like a soil scientist. What just give us a nutshell of what your process to write a trend like that, what you go through in terms of your research. How do you do it? How do you approach it?
I think just overreading. I mean, this is, scientists have been talking about this for over a decade. There's amazing things that have been written about this. It's really now is that this will become, I believe, because the soil crisis is real. And And I do believe that it's going to become addressed in all different ways in different wellness spaces. Hospitality has a huge, with its footprint, a huge opportunity. It's all about acre by acre by acre, rewilding the soil, restoring the soil. They have a huge footprint. They could become beacons of regenerative agriculture, nix the lawns. So anyway, it's a very rich and it's funny, like when you think, will soil exposure be someday like a pillar of wellness in some ways, like exercise or even healthy eating? I mean, it's not far-fetched.
That's pretty fascinating. Now, I know sometimes when you write your trends, you have an experience related to it, and we'll get to that in your next trend in just one second. So did you go out and experience soil in any way? I mean, you live in LA. What did you do? Did you do anything that...
I'm not sure I have the richest soil in my apartment, next to my apartment in LA. I mean, the health of the soil matters too. It's dirt. It's a funny trend because dirt is the opposite of what we want. Dirt is dead soil. Healthy soil is, packed with bacteria and fungus and microbial, richness. Have I got, I have been lying in the soil just thinking about it. And people have this, old idea that there's tetanus. And I mean, this is very, very, very rare. And if you don't live on a farm, next to a livestock farm. I mean, so yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about though, when you think about the soil microbiome and the human microbiome. It's a whole different, the microbiome science is a whole different way to look at wellness, because wellness used to, as I say, I said dirty wellness because it's the opposite of this clean obsession, which predicates our body as a closed off temple that we can't put toxic things in. And this kind of obsessional, the microbiome science opens up a whole, not just how we see healthcare, but wellness. We are just interactions between microbial communities and different microbiomes. So I think it's sort of a fascinating, kind of rips the lid off your head about how to deliver wellness.
Yeah, it does. It's a remarkable piece of work, and thank you for that. Let's move on to your second trend, and then I'm going to ask you to talk about the other trends and your sort of takeaways from them. But tell us about Health and Wellness Coaching Gets Certified, because you actually went through a coaching program, did you not? And your coach is on the call.
I'm so thrilled that my coach is on the call. And you have to go through it to really understand it. Anyway, the trend, Alina Hernandez, it's wonderful. This trend is about the fact that we spend 8.3 trillion on healthcare, 4.4 trillion on wellness, and we're still losing the chronic disease battle. And it's why you wonder, why have we not had professionals that are trained and laser focused on behavior change, evidence-based approaches to behavior change at the center of both healthcare and wellness? They've been super missing. And now we see the trend. They're finally here. They're called certified health and wellness coaches, and they're trained in a very unique skill set. They talk to you on Zoom, and they use evidence-based communication techniques, very nuanced techniques that get people to develop their own motivations and intrinsic motivations and confidence to hit super realistic weekly well-being goals. They spend time with you, around 50 minutes a week for at least 3 months. It's not like anything I've ever experienced. So, I mean, the trend covers a lot of things. The training programs and certification is in place all around the world. 95 training programs that are certified by the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching, revered organizations like Mayo and Duke. It's so exciting, the new models of public health and primary care startups like Vera Whole Health, where they're creating care teams. And many people argue this is the future of medicine, where this health and wellness coach is as central as the doctor in care for people. So it also covers digital health companies, which is a very complicated issue, and I take umbrage with their position towards coaching. But basically, I think what's so the sort of aha for me in both having been coached and understanding how the coaching, the evidence-based coaching model works, is that you think of medicine and wellness as opposites, but they both work on a prescriptive model. So, you know, doctors are like, lose weight, and wellness gurus, wellness works on a guru model, which is, you know, training and follow me on this path to weight loss, but neither have been able to focus on or crack the behavior change problem. If anything, the fact that wellness fanatics run from fad to fad is a sign that it's not working. But health and wellness coaches are a very interesting health and wellness practitioner because they do not use a prescriptive model. They don't give you any advice and they don't tell you what to do. They try to create a process that sparks your own motivation, like really deep within you, and you forge the plan. And I think wellness has resisted these coaches, partially because they don't sell anything. But they're going to be working with doctors, insurers, fitness trainers, more resorts, physical therapists, hospitals, and in the United States, the codes are in place for insurance to cover them as a healthcare expense. So it's just like in all the wellness coaches in the world, and there are a trillion, this is a very unique and very important development.
And this is, would you say this is part of that sort of getting serious and more sober, that the certification?
This is a prime and very powerful example of how healthcare is meeting wellness. So healthcare is acknowledging that, you know, empathy, practitioners trained in empathy, in conversational techniques, in support, spending time with patients, you know, no judgment. Like they're acknowledging that the coach is the missing piece of the healthcare puzzle. And there's some real momentum in the United States. Morgan Health, Baylor University adopting this advanced primary care where coaching is just as central as your doctor.
Beth, you went through the coaching process. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact it had on you, and have there been changes to your behavior and your lifestyle as a result?
Yeah, I'm a tough nut to crack. Like I'm in behavior change problems, but yeah, it's funny and it's emotional. It's a lot like therapy, but it's you talking, but they reflect back on you. So they don't interpret you or tell you what to do, but they reflect back what you're saying. And the reflecting back leads to a kind of, these are the lies I tell myself, these are the things I tell myself, but also just the support and also just super, you can hit this next week. Like if you can't go outside next week into the sun for 4 hours, like, you know, it's not like trying to join CrossFit. You move from doable to doable to doable. And by that, you know, within weeks, you've moved pretty far.
So did it move? So how did you move? Can you just give us one example of
something? So I
that
started out spending more circadian light time in bright sun outside working. And then I moved to doing that by walking 3 or 4 times a week. So that's where I'm at now. And there's other things, you talk about everything, work, you know. Yeah, so it's just a very interesting process because it's all about you, but you have a kind of mirror and a support staff, and the way that the conversation unfolds, it feels like you're making the decisions, but they're helping you make them.
Okay, well, it sounds great. And we look forward to hearing in the future how it has had long-term impact. Next time we talk, okay. We'll talk about that. But let's move on to the other trends. And I'm going to ask you, you didn't write these trends, but you've read these trends. You're the trends forecaster. Your sort of takeaway from them. So let's go to toxic muscularity comes clean. How bulging biceps and rippling abs have had a negative ripple effect on male body image. This is a really interesting trend.
Yeah, this is about the silent, you know, heretofore silent body image crisis that boys and men suffer from a culture that just feeds them relentless imagery about being lean and shredded. and the psychological fallout, suicide, mental illness. Men represent now a third of all eating disorders. And it's obviously led to a hugely dangerous industry of anabolic androgenic steroids and other performance enhancing drugs that are very common. And so the trend is about how change is here. New organizations that are taking toxic muscularity out of the closet, big stars like Richard Madden of Bodyguard or the new Batman, Robert Pattinson, becoming super loud critics of the muscle worshiping culture that have been force fed to men. I mean, what really is just amazing about this trend is, women's body image crisis, body positivity, body image crisis has been so tackled. I mean, you cannot say weight loss now on the internet or you will be like torn down as a company. And yet at the same time, there's been no acknowledgement of this muscle culture and this ripped culture that has been fed by the fitness industry to men. I mean, I was thinking about it like, men do pretty well in society, but they're often super underserved in wellness. And I think this is an example of just how can there be such a disconnect between how we treat women's body issues, and we haven't even talked or begun to talk about male body issues. So I think it's really important. And I think everybody that is in the fitness industry should should interrogate their message and their media, the bodies that they're projecting, because there's a devastating effect on boys and men.
I think that, you're right that the wellness world, it's a different focus. And this really shines a light on something that has been a problem for a long, long time. And maybe there'll be some shift there. I want to jump to Wellness Welcomes the Metaverse, because I want to bring Susie Ellis into this conversation, another incredible trends forecaster, spotter for years and years, and wrote a trend inspired by what she was seeing happening and her visit to CES in Las Vegas. And so Susie, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the trend for a minute, and then we'll do Beth's sort of takeaway on that and the metaverse and wellness and what all that means.
Sure. Well, even the title, Wellness Welcomes the Metaverse, was sort of the message. When I went to CES, which is the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, it happens right at the beginning of the year. And this is the second time I went. I went a few years ago before COVID, and there were 170,000 people there. And I was like blown away by all the technology. And, I was there obviously to learn, because this is not my area of expertise. So going there this year, there were many fewer because of COVID, maybe 30 or 40,000, but still, and in a way, it was even more interesting because there weren't so many lines and, huge crowds. So I had a little more time to really try things out. And what I realized, and interestingly enough, because there's a lot of trends that were written at the end of last year, and nobody really talked about the metaverse. And the reason for that is because we all started talking about it when Mark Zuckerberg talked about changing the name of Facebook to Meta, because he sees the future in the metaverse. And that was, I think, at the end of October. So, it took a little time for people to talk about it. And now there's other terms, metaverse, omniverse, Web3, and so on. But what I remember, because I've been in the industry a long time, is that the wellness world, we were a little slow to really embrace technology years ago. We actually sort of preferred to, not embrace it, but, because we recognize the value of exercise, nutrition, stress reduction, and so on. And I remember being part of destination spas and other places, and the very easy and quick idea was, well, turn off your phone. Just, let's put it away. We'll put it in a sleeping bag so it can be away, and you can, enjoy your spa or wellness experience. And we were kind of, that was working for us for a while, to sort of ignore it and be away from it. But that's change, because technology now is an important part of all of our lives. Communicating, staying connected at home. We talked about the wellness sabbatical a few years ago, where people are going away and they're balancing their work with their wellness. And that is the future, including, of course, the technology of booking kinds of programs, looking at what's happening with telemedicine, how Beth is able to do a training with a wellness coach in Germany. And so the reality is that technology has brought us lots of fantastic things that are helping both health and medicine. And I did see that at CES with all kinds of experiences. And of course, the virtual reality, which is now going more into reality and virtual reality, struck me as something that has a lot of potential. So the bottom line in the trend was that I talked about the fact that nobody can really define the metaverse at the moment, because that was my concern. Is like, I don't know what the metaverse is. And here I am at CES. Well, I realized, the people on the stage were saying, well, we don't really know what the metaverse is. We just know it's a more immersive, future of the internet. And what I really realized is that as a wellness industry, we should be open to what can we learn, what can we contribute to making the more evolution of virtual reality, augmented reality, and if all the NFTs, all the things people are talking about, how can we contribute to it? So the bottom line is, let's welcome it, contribute, and really see how we can help people in our focus on wellness worldwide. For wellness for all, wellness for nature. And utilize those tools in a smart way and be part of the conversation and get involved. So that was—
Thank you, Susie. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating trend, and the idea of the industry being open to things and embracing them and figuring out how not to be just against them as a knee-jerk reaction, thinking that technology is sort of anti-wellness. Beth, your thoughts on that, and then I think it connects to the wellness tech to technological wellness, a fresh take on digital health. Might you sort of connect the dots there or comment on both of those?
So one of the trends, the title says it all, we talk so much about wellness technology, digital fitness, meditation apps, but we don't, the problem is that the technology that we really use all day long, that we spend all our time with, is really bad for us. So, it's an interesting that we have these two trends. I wouldn't call it yin and yang, but they're the flip side of each other, but they also represent the future of the world. So we're going to have a more digital world. And at the same time, the trend, technological wellness, is about learning to manage and having companies themselves get real about helping us stop, manage this. So, what's interesting about Susie's metaverse trend, the metaverse, virtual reality, augmented reality, haptic technology that lets you feel in virtual worlds, is going to be so much more immersive and lifelike. So you got the problem, if you think you're sucked in now, just imagine. But at the same time, I think for all the caution about the metaverse and its over immersibility, I think health and wellness will be its bright spot. There's a lot of things that can be done in a more lifelike and immersive world that can really help health and wellness. You just have to try something like Supernatural, the virtual reality fitness workout. You're not like on a treadmill, you're like hiking. It makes you go further. It's more engaging. And in medicine, they're called virtual reality therapeutics, but they're actually prescription strength VR games that are now approved by the FDA for things like back pain and depression and PTSD and brain fog from COVID. So I think the metaverse, within the metaverse, and Susie's right, there's an opportunity for the seriously travel industry, mental wellness, huge, fitness, huge. There's a huge opportunity for almost every market in wellness to do something powerful and positive in this new, whatever you want to call it, Web3, more immersive, more lifelike world. But the two trends show that we're entering a world where the digital threatens to completely subsume the difference between the real and the not real, i.e. the metaverse. And also, yeah, there are two trends that just show that it's going to involve a lot of balance.
Well, let's step out of the metaverse into wellness travel. Let's talk about wellness travel. I know Elaine is on the call. Seekers welcome. Post-pandemic travelers are ready for adventure and engagement. Now, this is in the real world, not the metaverse, but talk about the takeaways from that trend and what's happening in the travel world.
Yeah, so, Elaine's point here is, we see things like forces like the Great Resignation and digital nomadism. Those are just two signs that people are focused on personal growth and some meaning beyond work in a way that's never happened before. And, if travel used to be more, mindless experience or relaxing, the new kind of wellness travel, the new travel model is more experiences that really ignite people's sense of purpose and help them grow intellectually and creatively. So she looks at different aspects of this. I talked about the boom in farm wellness resorts, so agricultural base where you learn skills and farming. She talks about all the amazing citizen science programs happening in travel, whether you go to restore a coral reef or even NPR's new tours where you work with the scientific and cultural experts. All the destinations that are getting people writing and painting, doing creative things. I have a lot to say about what I see as a kind of, if wellness was once mindless, in other words, it was focused on only physical health and beauty, and then it was mindful. I think the next level of wellness is actually a kind of new intellectual wellness, which is, wellness that experiences that feed the mind. I think people, they want a wellness that respects their brains, their desire to learn, to go deeper. It's part of this, what I said, more serious, sober. But I think Elaine's trend really gets to this new intellectual wellness that I see out there. I really see it, and it's interesting. I'm really interested in a sub-trend of hers, which is she covers the surge in Indigenous travel experiences globally. We're used to, having people do Thai massage and, Africa. This sort of a mass exportation of Asian approaches that are now seen more as cultural appropriation in wellness, the displacement and the westernization of and also we see domestic travel surging. But Native populations are now reclaiming their homelands. It's happening in Australia, amazing. But I think there's a real move towards a kind of Indigenous wellness, the wellness of Indigenous knowledge and people in the place that you're at, as opposed to importing endlessly from other places. So, you see it everywhere. It's like, yep. This week you see there's a big article in the Guardian about Celtic wellness experiences and the mania for druidry at UK spa resorts. And then this week we see that, next week, Zulal Wellness Resort in Qatar will be the first to focus on traditional Arabic and Islamic medicine. It's never, it's a massive ancient body of knowledge that's never even been experimented with, because we're all stuck on yoga and that's all wonderful, TCM and Indian traditions, but native, I just think it's such a welcome trend. It has a lot. I
found it also very just hopeful to think about all of these things, in the world we're living in.
Yeah, and it benefits those communities who are now having lands restored. And I think that kind of rethinking authenticity and the Indigenous and respect, and not displacing wellness cultures and commodifying them in the same way. So I think that I was very interested in that sub-trend with hers. But it's all about purpose, intention, learning, intellect, creativity, as becoming so much more important in travel.
And well done, Elaine, brava, and thank you so much for writing that and working with us on that. And I don't know about you guys, but I could spend an hour talking about each trend with Beth, because she has so many insights and so much depth of knowledge on all of this. But I'm going to try to get to all of them. So I'm going to pivot now to senior living disrupted. A wrinkle in time no more. Talk a little bit about what's happening in that particular sector, Beth, and that trend, the takeaway.
Yeah. Well, this trend is about how the old age segregated active adult senior living concept is simply not going to cut it for the next generation of people, young boomers, Gen X. Dave Stewart's on the call, they're completely redefining what it means to grow old. They're retiring later, if at all. They're active. They refuse to be defined by age. They want to be defined by their passions. Longevity is the next disruptor in everything. Our 60 plus global population is going to double worldwide by 2050. So this is a trend about not just more wellness in retirement homes or senior, it's about intergenerational living and how that will transform the senior living concept. You see this happening in Serenbe, Chip Conley's Modern Elder Academy, a new development called Kalamos outside Denver. It's percolating in the 100 university-based, quote unquote, senior living communities. But, this is about putting ages, that health and wellness is really about mixing age groups in new models. And obviously, when I think about, I've been worried about senior living since I was like 15. Like my terror of it. So
somebody's going to put you somewhere isolated from
when
the world.
You think about the fact that the current market has only the response of fear and loathing, you could say that there's a rather insane opportunity for reinvention. People are so hungry for new ideas about where I'll live when I get older, whether it's 65, 75, 85, 95. This is a market, ripe for opportunity is an understatement, because how many markets that are so big are defined by a lot of loathing and fear? So this is really interesting experiments in intergenerational living, and there'll be many more. Agrahood in Santa Clara outside, in Silicon Valley, is a farm-based community that mixes low-income seniors with everybody else and makes the farm the center of the community. So really, and not expensive, models that are not just luxury level.
When you mentioned 65, I thought, I haven't really thought, I have not been afraid since I was 15, but I am very glad that category is being redefined and reimagined, because it is an incredible opportunity. Let's get serious about medical research for a minute and the innovative tech that's closing the gender gap there. This is our friend Rena wrote an incredible trend about this. We talk a little bit about this at the summit in Boston. We had a number of panels and speakers on the disparity in research with women's health and medical research and what that's about. Can you give us the takeaway from this one, Beth?
Yeah, so we all know that women's health has long suffered from a major research gap. We don't know enough about health conditions specific to women, like menopause, infertility, endometriosis. And we don't know enough about women's health in general. It's been understudied, it's been underfunded. Women have the hard time getting the right diagnosis. It takes longer. They have a harder time getting the right treatments. And honestly, it impacts their view of mainstream healthcare, which is one reason that wellness has surged as an alternative, because they listened. Wellness listens more. But anyway, so this trend is really interesting. It's about startups and big tech giants like Apple using artificial intelligence, smartphone apps, wearables, virtual trials, smart bras that are collecting a lot of observational data and biometric data that's expanding the women's health research archive. So it's allowing for better and quicker representation of women in trials, gathering a whole lot more data. There's just so much going on. The period tracking app Clue, which is a vast database, sharing all this research and information on how menstruation affects pain, moods, ovulation with research organizations. This week, Apple, who's partnered with Harvard for a women's health, tech-based women's health study, released a super big new study that used a lot of period tracking data showing how polycystic ovary syndrome has really wider health impacts. So it's using technology. You know, everyone knows the clinical trial costs a fortune, they take years. They can't track, they don't typically can't track data over very long, it's too expensive. But so there's a whole bunch of ways to pull in more information about women's health and women's bodies and put it to use for, you know, for solutions. I mean, for me, the big takeaway here, not that it isn't the most amazing trend, is why isn't the wellness industry, who's accused constantly of not having enough clinical trials and evidence for a lot, you know, for most of its approaches and products, not thinking like femtech is here and using more technology solutions, you know, whether apps, virtual trials, trackers, to gather more data on the efficacy of different wellness products and approaches. It seems
it's a wonderful point, and it really points to Susie's comment about how the wellness industry has been very slow to adapt technology and integrate it into, you know, the industry itself. And this is an incredible place. This is a very good point of convergence for that. That could be powerful.
Doctors will scream, it's only the randomized clinical trial, double blind, that's the top of the pyramid in research, and it is. But there's a pyramid in research, and observational data and tracking data, especially as trackers are getting so sophisticated. You know, this is important, especially when you don't have the funding, and we need to speed things up. We need to speed things up for minority populations. You know, we don't know enough about Black health, you know, I mean, this is technology. So Silicon Valley is helping bridge these medical research gaps.
Yeah.
And it's really impactful.
And it's a really fascinating trend. We have 2 left to get to, and I'm determined to do it. I'm going to turn us back to where we kind of began this conversation of the next gen naturalism, the return of self-reliance. Talk a little bit about that and the takeaway, and then we'll get to our last urban bathhouse trend.
Yeah, so this is a bigger trend I see. This is really nutshells it, which is this wellness sort of turning becoming more focused on survivalism, self-sufficiency, and self-reliance. Whether it's people going to wilderness schools and learning to do basic things like purify water and build fires, this massive boom in home gardening, super high-tech solutions that bring gardening right into your living room, or else just sophisticated gardening in your backyard, foraging. I mean, it's amazing, the foraging boom globally. Like 450 million views of foraging on TikTok, you know, or 5, I can't remember. But, you know, this is about the future, the sense of needing to be prepared, to be capable, to be self-reliant, to be citizen scientists. And I think just big picture, it's not, and this nutshells it, it's one of the more interesting sort of mindset shifts in the sort of, not only in the world, but in the wellness space.
And last, but certainly not least, urban bathhouses and wellness playgrounds. And this is about affordable wellness coming to a city near you. And affordable wellness is something we talk about a lot, wellness for all. So tell us the takeaway on this one, Beth.
So yeah, one of the big macro trends that comes out of the pandemic that I didn't get to at the beginning is the sort of complete reimagining. I mean, cities suffered greatly during the pandemic, and it exposed how unwell cities are. They're places of retail and consumption. They don't have enough green space. They don't have enough wellness. People in cities suffered the most. So this is a trend that looks at, you know, so there's so many ways that the urban spaces all over the world, you know, more green space, new circuits that marry wellness activities with green space. And this trend also looks at, you know, this boom in urban bathhouses and thermal bathing resorts that are always been associated with Europe, but they're now moving to places like, you know, all over the world, Asia, North America. So you have groups like Terme Group from Austria that has huge millions of visitors in Europe to their affordable, accessible, communal, social water playgrounds. They're now going to go into Manchester, Glasgow, New York, Toronto, LA, DC, and Robert Hammond of the Highline is involved. So, it's a high level thing. I mean, you see QC Terme, an Italian company, now opening QC New York on Governor's Island. You see urban saunas changing and exploding, events, sauna off-grid experiences in Las Vegas. You see amazing things like new beaches coming to Brooklyn and Manhattan, man-made beaches. You see Madrid investing in all over the city in well-being hubs and sports centers. And I mean, it's just so interesting that one of the great fallouts of the pandemic is the re-examining the city. Paris is about to ban traffic. So more green space, more urban farming, more affordable, communal, big bathing, saunas, beaches. So, I mean, to me, it's just like a joyful trend.
Wellness Playground and Urban Bathhouse coming to LA, did you say? Is that something you will be partaking of?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think in New York, when I think about how New York is so oppressive, when I think about beaches in Manhattan or, or just big, even on Governor's, these big public, not outrageously expensive. I just think, the knowledge here, Europe has known about this a long time, and now it's being exported culturally.
Yeah.
And we're all going to become German.
And it helps to democratize it. I mean, it gives people an access point.
Yeah, well, a lot of the stuff like the Tide in London and the new parks, of course, are completely free. And then the bathhouses are, reasonable for like a long day vacation kind of experience, under $100, definitely, under 80. So anyway, yeah, it's just, it's funny because I think, just the way that people are rethinking what a city should be is really interesting.
Beth, you've got 1 minute for some final thoughts, then we're going to give you massive love and rounds of applause. But final thoughts to leave us with today?
Anyway, I wanted to press again that I call it intellectual wellness, but I think it captures a kind of shift I'm seeing. I see a lot of interesting examples of how wellness approaches are respecting people's intelligence and really feeding their quest for like knowledge and growth. This is very different than the wellness market of before. So, you see it everywhere. The Met just launched a podcast called Frame of Mind, which is about a very sophisticated exploration of how art supports well-being. I just think people are going deeper. They're almost becoming like, they're quasi-scientists. And I think there's so much richness in the wellness world to not say believe, but teach, go deeper. So I'm feeling I want to end with that because I think it's more positive than saying it's serious and sober.
I think that is the perfect end. And I think if there were a poster child for intellectual wellness, it would be you, Beth McGroarty. And I ask everybody to unmute and show Beth some love. That's absolutely incredible.
Thank you very much. Amazing.
Thank you.
Absolutely amazing, Beth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susie, your hair
Thank you.
looks
Just
great.
fantastic.
I like it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing.
Great masterclass.
So exciting.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.